What's up guys, it's Minx. This is going to be sort of a release video, I guess. The last one was supposed to be, but I did some things I wanted to delay this for. So we've got a couple small changes that aren't like super huge, but I wanted to mention them here. And then we'll get to a little bit of a gameplay review. We won't go too in depth because of the code series covers 90% of what we got going on here. But for those of you that are curious about the code side of things, this part will be for you. And then later in the video, in a couple minutes, we'll get into the actual gameplay. So I've added a couple things here real quick, and I think I looked at them in a previous video. Our modify level is a little bit more advanced now. Firstly, it gathers all of the enemies stored, all the enemy information, and then it only modifies them if it needs to. So for example, the first thing it does, it stores them, and it stores them with their rarity, and of course it'll fix them. And then if allow all enemies on map, it's going to set the enemies of that level to our stored list, which allows all enemies, or whatever the enemies levels are set to. And then we also have a natural enemy spawn. So if enemies are supposed to naturally spawn, it's going to turn them off, and then it's going to store them for us again, just in case. So it stores all the enemies. Where is it doing it here? So for example, it stores them up here, and then I kind of do it duplicate here, but just in case. The reason I do it just in case is kind of a belt and suspenders. If one thing happens but the other thing doesn't, or if neither, and then we might get an issue where we don't have the rarity saved, then we might not be able to fix it. So we store the rarity and the enemy here as well, and then we set the rarity to 0. And then if we go back in with utilities and we say, hey, actually I do want to spawn these enemies, so we say, let's see here, we actually don't do it in utilities, excuse me, we do it inside of our configuration controller. Sounds a little weird, I know. But what it actually does is when we toggle this, instead of like saying, hey, if this is true, do something, it's when we set this variable to true or false, it's going to do something based on that. So if value is false, it's going to reset them to 0. So this is not enemy spawning naturally. And then if we set it to true, then the enemies are going to spawn by default. And then if we come in here, same thing for allow all enemies. If our current level is not null, which I believe we're doing that here as well, we are going to set the information, and then, this is setting it, and then in this case we are storing it, and then updating it. So everything else is good. Let's hide out of that. That's really the only change that isn't really covered in code, if I'm not mistaken, except for maybe like the fly hack thing that I really don't want to go into. As for those that haven't followed the code, if you've been following the code series and you are like, you've already saw this stuff or it's boring anyway, you can skip it. If you're interested, we have something for commands that make them so much better than they were in the previous one. So firstly, handling commands is already so much simpler than it was. This is literally the main primary method that handles commands. We can see there's not a lot going on here. It's actually super simple. So firstly, we determine if we should be even handling a command. If it doesn't, we return false. We can actually hide this. We don't need that, and I think we don't need, I think it's printing it somewhere else. It's not printing it here though, so that's okay. And then after that, we are handling the command. Now these commands are mapped to methods automatically. We're not doing like if checks. They are literally mapped to methods using a dictionary. So then it goes in, the filtered command goes in, and it runs it to one of the things. Now you don't have to type it in correct. We see that it is filtered. What we do is, if you type in, let's say, /God mode, then it's or /God or /GDO. It's going to enables God mode, because we use an algorithm to do that. Same thing for /spawn. Spawn, we have /spawn, /spawn near, probably /spawn random. I think, and spawn random are going to do the same thing. The only difference there is spawn near, but you could spell them incorrectly. So if we look at commands here, this is our list. This is our official list of commands, and they're all mapped to different things. Some of them do the same thing, like God and God mode. Yeah, spawn random, spawn, and spawn near. And then speed, sprint, fly, fly hack. I may add some more later. I don't know. It may also be like if this will be coming from feedback, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So next up is the gameplay review. So let's go ahead and hop into a private game with Lethal Company. I just thought that part was interesting, and that same rule applies to enemies and player names as well. It also applies to everything that you can type in, because I wanted to make that as easy as possible. So I'll do a friends only on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start it. Now, not everything is implemented, and the menu is going to be incomplete. That's part of early access. I apologize. So first things first, let's go ahead and just kind of fly over here. I like this spot because none of the enemies can get to it. So I'll sit here. Go ahead and turn it off, and we can just chill up here. So looking at host settings, these have not changed since the beginning of the server server series. These three have existed. These are all host restricted. If you are not the host, they will not work. They will not enable. And pretty much everything here is actually like host only, to be honest, regardless, because this stuff, even though you could probably toggle it, it's not going to work unless you're the host. And same thing for spawning. So this is pretty much just host only. And things that aren't are restricted to host. So server settings, the only two that work are the natural enemy spawning. I'll probably make the other ones red to indicate that they don't work before releasing, because I figured it'd be easier. But you can prevent enemies from spawning. As you see, there's no enemies on the map. There's no birds or like anything like that. I don't even know if bees would end up spawning. I don't even know if they spawn on this map at this point. No, they definitely do. I don't know if they... No, they're an enemy or an item, so they would likely spawn. But we can go ahead and toggle it on. And we're not going to see anything immediately, but we will start to see things pop up, most likely. So that's natural enemy spawning. And by default, that's enabled. By default, I guess you could say, everything is set to the default value. So spawning enemies, I mean, it works. Host settings, this is disabled. Custom movements disabled. The default is 5, and fly hack is disabled. Natural enemy spawning is enabled, and allow all enemies is disabled. So everything would work as if you did not have a mod, even though things are happening in the background, so that way you can do stuff. Then if we were to try and spawn something, we could do the thing here. Let's try and do a giant. It's a forest giant, and we'll just spawn it near me. So it indicated that it was able to spawn. However, I think it failed. Let's go look. It probably failed. So when it says success, I've got to fix that error code. The way I've written this, it's hard to get like status codes from stuff like saying, hey, if this failed or not. So the giant's likely not going to spawn, but if I had like a spawn near Mink's dog, it would also fail. Let's see, let's try a dog. It looks like none of those can spawn. Let's go ahead and enable allow all enemies. Okay, so we got the dog. Let's go ahead and turn off fly hack real quick. Let's spawn the giant. And that may be a bug with the real time. I don't know. That'll be something I have to get feedback on. I could have swore that was working as expected, but maybe not. So we've got a couple giants here. Let's see here. What else could we spawn out here? I think we could spawn leviathans. What else? I gave those a few names, I think. Let's see. I think I called them worms. Enemy display names. Here we go. Worm. Here we go. We could spawn worms instead. And we could spell it wrong, so we could do like worm. If I go down here, yeah. So yeah, that works too. Something else for this. So for example, worm is spelt wrong. We could type in /fy, and I think that would yeah, /fy. That works. /gdo would enable or disable God mode, things like that. You can type things wrong, and this is something that's going to require feedback over time. So for example, like I don't know what people would misspell or whatever, like mistype. So, for example, if you like to type in something that I don't have in the dictionary, that could be some feedback to, it's like, hey, I type this in a lot, but this points to something else. Can you add this or whatever. And then in the future, I might add like a dictionary file of like things to search for, or I don't know, something like that, like an ad thing. We'll see. But that's pretty much it for features. There's not a lot going on yet. I plan to add a lot more. I want to get back to where GameMaster was, where I left off, just less broken, which is why this is only releasing on GitHub. So that's it for gameplay. It wasn't very interesting right now, but the point of this is to mess with others as a host, not joining other people's lobbies and ruining their game. They need to be joining you for that. So anyway, let's talk about release here. So the game is releasing on GitHub, or the mod is releasing on GitHub only. Right now, it will be released on Thunderstore after we have worked out bugs, and I am comfortable enough to release it on the Thunderstore. So, I'm going to release it on GitHub. Leave a download link in the description for the release. If you have any bugs or quality of life issues, such as, for example, a command doesn't work the way you want it to, or it points to a different command that you weren't expecting when you typed in what you typed, please leave it in there, and I will fix that. Those are easy fixes. If there's any bugs where like something's toggled and it's not working, or something's broken and it's not seeming to work, please let me know that as well. Otherwise, that's it for today. I appreciate you guys following along and showing the support. It's made this a heck of a lot easier. I wasn't really enjoying the Lethal Company stuff back then, but now that I'm kind of doing my own thing, it's it's feeling a lot better. So I appreciate everyone. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day.